welcome to KTAL News Now. I'm your host, Anthony Mocklin, and today is Wellness Wednesday here on KTAL News Now, where we will be talking about all sorts of health stories, tips you can provide in your life to have a happy and healthy holiday season. And first up on the list, this one blew me away, and this is what can be described as nothing short of a medical miracle. And I'm talking about one of the most recent stories that came out of California, where a baby grew on the outside of a woman's uterus behind a 22-pound cyst. And this baby, again, was born in California at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. And the fact that he ended up being healthy is, again, nothing short of a miracle because of the insane work that the doctors at the hospital provided to both the mother and the child. So the fact that they are happy and healthy, I could not be more elated for them. But it took a team of 30 medical specialists and to deliver this baby from a 41-year-old mother, Suze Lopez. And she was carrying this nearly full-term baby in her stomach the entire time. And she only found out that she was pregnant right before she went to have the 22-pound cyst in her stomach removed. And it was a benign cyst, thankfully. It was not cancer or anything, but that's what initially she thought it was, some sort of tumor. And it had been growing for years. And she also could have, whenever she took that pregnancy test before she got it removed, it could have been a false positive from the cyst that was taking up so much space in her stomach. And then once she found out about that, she shared the news with her husband about 3 days later, but then that's when she started feeling very, very severe abdominal pain and then had to go to the hospital. And doctors worked to help stabilize her very, very high blood pressure. They ordered blood work to be done. She got an MRI and an ultrasound, and sure enough, she was pregnant, but they found out that the uterus was empty, and the baby was actually developing outside of the uterus. It was in the abdomen near the liver, with the baby's butt actually resting on the uterus. And the fact that she was pregnant and that the baby developed this far outside of the uterus is nothing short of a rarity. Pregnancies where the baby develops that far outside of it are very, very rare. The doctor said it was pretty much unheard of, especially since the fact that the baby continued to develop outside of the uterus. And as the baby developed, it ended up pushing the cyst forward in her stomach, and it created the appearance of what was previously thought to be a tumor as it was growing larger. And they thought it was just getting bigger and bigger, so that's why she had to try to get it removed. But it was actually the baby growing and pushing that further and further up. But if you look at the statistics when it comes to abdominal ectopic pregnancies, it is very, very rare in the United States. Usually about 1% to 2% of pregnancies are abdominal ectopic pregnancies. And this can pose a very, very high risk to both the mother and the fetus. And this process usually occurs when the fertilized egg implants itself outside of the uterus, and it often hurts the vital organs and blood vessels that are present there. And it can cause catastrophic maternal bleeding for both the mother and fetal death for the child. But the doctors, they pretty much had to plan out and organize how we're going to get this baby out. And especially considering the fact that it is, again, outside of the uterus, so they had to deliver the baby with a placenta as well as the blood vessels that it was attached to in the abdomen, and remove the 22-pound cyst in this mother's belly. So this is nothing short of a Herculean effort from the entire medical team at Cedars-Sinai. And thankfully, the baby was delivered, but as soon as it was, the mother started hemorrhaging very, very badly. So they had to make quick work of that while also transporting the baby to the neonatal intensive care unit, or ICU. And the critical concern for the child was his lungs. And it got really complicated once the baby came out of anesthesia quicker than normal. And they said he was feisty as well once he woke up. But thankfully, the breathing tube that they implanted in him was able to be taken out the following day. And lo and behold, Ryu Jesse Lopez was born into the world. And shockingly enough, he was born at 8 pounds, and he had a full head of hair, as you can see in some of the pictures, although some of these are more recent. He had very, very few health problems once he was born. So again, props to the medical team for doing exactly what they needed to, and they went above and beyond to help this mother and her child. And thankfully, they are all happy and healthy for the holidays to spend some time together as a family. Going through, I can't even imagine going through something like this, especially considering that you just thought there was this cancer growing in your stomach, but it turns out there was a baby behind that cyst that was in there. And it's just absolutely insane, the fact that they were able to pull this off, and that both the mother and the child were completely healthy, free of major health problems. And it seemed like they were doing very well based on these pictures. It looks like such a cute baby. They look so happy that they are finally able to relax a little bit for the holidays and spend some time together. So that was pretty remarkable story that really, really caught my eye. I'm sure it interested y'all as well. But again, crazy, crazy story. And we have, if you are a parent or a mother of children, especially around the holidays, you'll know that getting them gifts, it can make them the happiest people in the world. But one thing that you should look out for is the type of gifts and toys that you're getting them. And there are actually some safety health tips from Christus Health here in our region when it comes to gift giving for your children this year, especially very, very young children. And Christus Health is pretty much ensuring that children stay safe with whatever toys they may open up on Christmas this year, because some of the most dangerous toys that are the most innocent looking ones. And I'm talking about building sets, balloons, art supplies, and especially toys with tiny pieces that presents a huge, huge choking hazard. And one 10-second label check, if you're just reading the toy manufacturer's details on the label of whatever you're considering purchasing, that can be a difference maker when it comes to if it is truly safe or not. And it can prevent injuries and unwanted emergency room visits, because the last thing you want to do on Christmas morning is have to take your child to an emergency room because they accidentally swallowed something or they hurt themselves while playing with a toy you got them. So be sure to take the right precautions. And the Consumer Product Safety Commission actually reported that over 154,000 emergency room visits were toy-related in 2023, and that did unfortunately include 10 deaths of children 12 or younger in that same year. So it's very, very important to know what exactly you're buying for your kids so that they can stay safe this Christmas and this holiday season. That the Consumer Product Safety Commission also seized almost 1.6 million dangerous toys during the 2024 fiscal year. And Christus Health has also provided 6 health tips whenever you're considering purchasing toys for your toddlers this season. Now, number 1, make sure that the toys are age appropriate. Most toys will have labels on them that say 3 and up or 7 and up, all the way up to 18 and up, depending on if you're a collector when it comes to Legos, because they have the 18 plus sets for those because they're so massive. But when it comes to younger children, make sure that they are getting the appropriate toys for their age range and to follow the manufacturer's age guidelines. Again, that will be printed on pretty much every label in any store that sells toys. So it should not be hard to miss. You might just have to squint your eyes a little bit because there is a lot of tiny writing on there usually, but it should be pretty easy to find. Number 2, beware of small parts. This goes without saying. This is a severe choking hazard. And one tip to make sure if you're trying to figure out if something is too small, usually for children 3 years or younger, if something can fit inside of a toilet paper roll, then that's probably too small for them and is definitely a severe risk of choking. So if you're deciding if it's too small or not, definitely use a toilet paper roll for comparison, because that is usually the guideline that they recommend when it comes to figuring out the size of what is appropriate for the children. And number 3, to skip high-risk toys. Now, these can be loose magnets or button batteries that can be ingested. Again, another choking risk. So make sure that nothing sort of breaks off or comes off very easily that they can ingest accidentally and then have to choke on it. And then that's just, you really don't want that for anybody. And God forbid something like that happens to anyone this year. But number 4, be sure to check recalls of toys. Now, this is very, very important because there are several toys each year that end up getting recalled because of a severe problem or risk that it poses. And one way you can find out if a toy is the subject of a recall is by visiting the CPSC recall database by visiting cpsc.gov/recalls. And they'll have a full database and information and everything you need to know about any potential recalls on toys this year. If you're looking for any specific toys that you might have a question about, or if you're worried that this could pose a threat, it will probably already be there. If you're concerned, I'm sure other people are as well. So it will probably be in that database. Again, that is cpsc.gov/recalls. And number 5, this one might be unpopular, but be sure to wear protective gear and give your kids protective gear if they have a ride-on toy like a horse or a car maybe. Be sure that they are wearing helmets and padding, especially elbow and knee padding, because the last thing you want is for them to get a brush burn and then have to wear a Band-Aid all day, and then they're holding their arm the rest of the time. Again, this might be unpopular because it might look lame or whatever, but you'd rather be safe than sorry when it comes to your kids, if we're being honest, because the last thing you want, again, is to have to take time out of your Christmas morning to get them, to treat them medically, or even in worst cases, take them to a hospital or emergency room. Again, that is the last thing you want this holiday season. So just to be safe, it's just to be safe. Don't worry about it. But the 6th and final step for this one is to inspect and supervise. So if you already got them something and they opened it, make sure that while they're playing with it, make sure that you are overseeing pretty much everything to make sure nothing goes wrong. Be sure to check for broken parts. Again, going back to one of the earlier steps where if something breaks off accidentally or if there's a small part that you did not foresee happening, be sure to step in and make sure that that gets nowhere near them so that in case they accidentally put it up to their mouth and ingest it and start choking on it, because that's the last thing you want with that. But if all these tips fail and you're trying to tell your kid you're just trying to keep them safe and they start having a meltdown, that actually leads us into our next topic regarding meltdowns, especially around the holidays, and how to prevent them from happening, because I'm sure a lot of you are traveling to see your families with your kids in the car. Usually that's not the most fun place for them to be. So it can, and these meltdowns can happen at any time and age. It really does not matter. It's just very unpredictable at times. But nationally recognized brain health expert Dr. Rebecca Jackson talks about what happens to the brain during a meltdown and the signs you can look out for on how to prevent the next one. And these tips include learning a child's signs and cues that things are beginning to escalate. And these can include flushed cheeks. Usually that's a very telling sign. And one of the first instances of a child having this rage starting to build up, and you can see it on their face with their cheeks being flushed or very, very red or beginning to change colors. And one thing that can change as well is their activity level. And this can include them starting to shut down, all of a sudden becoming hyperactive, or getting louder or more agitated as the situation starts to escalate more and more. So be sure to recognize that and know when to step in. But if you are willing to step in and you are wanting to do something to change something, that leads us to our second tip, and that is to beware of a child's sensory threshold. Now, if we're all human, we all know that whenever we all recognize that enough is enough at a certain point. We all have this tipping point when it comes to being very agitated and sort of lashing out if it ever boils to that point. And once this threshold is crossed, we become more negative and irritable with pretty much everything. And that is the same for children. Their sensory inputs, make sure that they are not too different, longer or larger than they're used to, because this is highly, highly fatiguing on the brain, and this is something that you want to avoid if possible. And number 3 on the list is to minimize chaos and to change their environment. Now, whenever a meltdown does occur, be sure that one of the first things you should do is to either remove them from the environment or ask other people that are in that environment to leave the room, so it can just be you and them, so you can reason with them and try to calm them down a little bit. Again, think calm, cool, quiet. You don't want any loud noises. Be sure to turn off any TVs or music that is playing, because that can only make things more irritable for them, and they get overwhelmed with so much going on. And if they're lashing out at you and they're yelling, the first instinct you want to do is yell back so they can hear you. But what's best usually is to come under your child's noises, not over them. And get quiet, not loud. That's pretty much what that means. And again, this yelling, it's a natural instinct that we all want to do and yell at them to scold them, but that only triggers their fight or flight even more. So you want to avoid that in most cases. And number 4 on the list is to use fewer words, not more. Again, this ties back into the previous step where you want to just be very calm, very cool and collected, and to just reason with them. Because if they are on the brink of a meltdown, I promise you, this is not the time to give them a life lesson or try to reason with them, because the more you try to explain yourself, their brain is just being so overwhelmed right now. Again, they're right at that tipping point, and their brain will not be processing any of this information that you're trying to give them. It will only frustrate them more. So try to use fewer words and to calm them down as best as possible. And the last tip on this list is to engage large muscle groups to help shift which parts of their brain is activated. Now, you might be thinking, what the heck do you mean by that? What does that have to do with meltdowns? But scientifically, when it comes to being active, that can do wonders for brain activity. And this can be going for a walk, on a bike ride, or just jumping on a trampoline. Like if they just want to do something, like just make sure that you suggest to do something fun to try to take their mind off of things, because something mindless that also engages their muscles, it also provides sensory input and helps reset their mood and emotions. So this is a very, very helpful tool to use if you're trying to calm them down in the best way possible. If you just want to go on a walk with them, if they just if they can't sit still, that's probably the best method for your specific situation when it comes to this. But our next topic involves family members who are unfortunately dealing with Alzheimer's or other dementia-related illnesses. I'm sure some of you have family members who are unfortunately dealing with that. It is a horrible, horrible disease. And according to recent studies and research, that there's over 7 million American families caring for someone with Alzheimer's or other dementia-related illnesses. And that is 7 million way too many, because it is such a horrible disease. I would not wish that on anyone. But you have to do your best to take care of them with how they are. You can't just mope and say, oh, I wish they were back to normal. You really have to meet them where they are especially when it comes to the holidays. And the Alzheimer's Foundation of America has listed a bunch of do's and don'ts when it comes to treating your family members with Alzheimer's and dementia. And especially considering that people living with dementia deserve to feel the joy and the warmth of the holiday season still. Like, they deserve that instead of being treated so differently, like a toddler almost. They may not be able to experience it how they used to, obviously, but again, that's what you really need to hone in on, is meeting them where they are to ensure that they have an enjoyable and comfortable experience. And if you're a caregiver of someone living with Alzheimer's or dementia, it's important to be proactive, adaptable, and to honor their wishes and current abilities. And these do's and don'ts, first up, we have do not over-decorate your house. If you're someone who is hosting family for the holidays, it is very, very important to not have way too many lights and ornaments everywhere, because this can confuse people with Alzheimer's and dementia and even cause wandering. And you really don't want them being overwhelmed with all of these overstimulating things that they're trying to look around and see. It's generally best to gradually phase in more meaningful and familiar decorations that they would know and love to create a familiar environment for them. And next up on the list is do remove hazards and dangerous decorations. And dementia, for those of you who have loved ones living with it, you know that it can change their vision as well as their depth perception. So if there's any loose wires or decorations that are on the ground, it is usually best to remove those from any walkable paths when you can, because their depth perception is way off. They're not exactly sure where it's going to be compared to you and I, if you are someone who is not living with it. And it is very, very important that they do not trip and fall, because especially if they are older individuals, this can only cause more injuries and more damage and potentially put them in a hospital. So it is generally best to avoid this where possible and keep walkways clear. Now, next up is either adapt past traditions or alter current ones to better fit the individual. Now, when it comes to living with Alzheimer's and dementia, usually this means they can no longer participate in more physical or brain working activities or traditions that your family might know and love from years past, but it's best to alter them in some way to where you can find a way to involve them in the activity still and to keep their brain churning and keep them on their toes when it comes to keeping them spry, if you will. And this can be done by finding something more manageable when it comes to activities. And, it can be very, very sad when it comes to knowing that they can no longer do a cherished tradition that you have in the past. But it's best to try to involve them a little bit more and make sure that they are engaged with the activity instead of focusing on what they can't do anymore, if that makes sense. And next up on the list is to prepare a quiet, calm place before gatherings. And this goes back to one of the first points with the over decorations, right? So you want to have this quiet, serene place for them to relax in if they do start to get overwhelmed or get very antsy. Because if you're a household that has a very loud or hectic holiday, this can be very, very overwhelming for people living with these diseases. And it's best to have the room set up with familiar items to them so that they can feel safe and at ease while they're in there, because they'll have something that is familiar to them. And it is best to maintain their regular routine in their day-to-day as much as possible or as accurately as possible, because again, this puts them at ease. It helps them relax a little bit. And the last tip is to do not refuse help. Now, if you have friends or family that is asking if you want assistance in helping take care of them, you absolutely take that every single time, but just make sure it is the right help and be very, very clear and precise when it comes to what exactly you want them to do or what you want from them in order to help your loved ones when it comes to this. And be very, very specific. Like, do not spare any details when it comes to this, because the littlest thing, if they don't know how to do something the right way, it can be very detrimental to the sick individual. And be very, very clear about what you need from them, and whether it's a friend or a family member or a neighbor, what might have you. But if you want more information, you can actually visit the Alzheimer's Foundation of America, and they have a helpline that is available 7 days a week. And you can find more information about that and the foundation itself at alzfdn.org. Now, when it comes to staying healthy for the holidays, if you are somebody who is very, very sick or gets seasonal illnesses, this one is definitely for you, because while the holidays are a wonderful time for everybody to get together in a large gathering and celebrate being with each other and cherishing those memories with each other, it can be stressful trying to plan everything like this with all the travel that people have to do. And it can be very, very taxing mentally, but also physically, going from place to place because your routines start to shift, your stress levels increase dramatically. You develop these seasonal illnesses, like I was saying, but there needs to be some sort of balance while enjoying yourself, but also making sure that you are staying safe. And immune health is the biggest factor when it comes to this, especially for seasonal illnesses. Make sure that your vaccines are up to date. These include flu shots, COVID, RSV, pneumonia. Make sure that you're up to date with all of your shots going into the holiday season. And this goes without saying, wash your hands. If you're somebody who doesn't wash your hands a lot, that is probably one of the biggest contributors to getting sick or just developing a small cold, is not washing your hands frequently, because that is the thing you use the most throughout the day, and you're constantly, if you're like touching your face, you're using it to eat, and all those germs are pretty much going up to your immune system, and it's not good. So wash them as often as possible and thoroughly as possible. Make sure you're washing them for like 20 seconds, not just a quick little thing, I'm done, dry them off. Really, really wash them and make sure that you are free from any germs this year. And there are plenty of clinics at pharmacies, specifically with CVS. They have their Minute Clinic, which provides virtual care to anyone 24/7 through virtual visits. So if you're someone who is out of town and you can't get to a pharmacy in time, they have virtual care if you are feeling under the weather, so they can diagnose you exactly what to do and what medications to take. And one big thing to do as well, aside from washing hands, is to make sure that you are well rested and that you are incorporating fruits and vegetables into your diet. This does wonders for your digestion and your immunity. This can boost both of those. So be sure that you're incorporating that this year. Don't just get, all the cake and the sweets and stuff whenever you visit the family for Christmas and you have that dinner. Don't get all the fried stuff. Make sure that you're eating healthy as well, because this can greatly improve your overall health, your digestion, and your immunity, like I was saying. But if you are planning to travel, make sure that you refill any needed prescriptions beforehand and early, because it can get really busy around the holiday season. And the last thing you want is to not have them have it for you before you're going out of town. And then all of a sudden you're a week or two or a couple days without your prescription that you might desperately need. And one way to avoid this is to, again, schedule them out early when it comes to refills, but also make sure you're packing a travel kit with all of your necessary prescriptions, as well as hand sanitizer and any pain medication that you might have to take if something goes awry in the moment. But copies of important health info can also help with this when it comes to if you're forgetting your medication. You can turn that into the nearest pharmacy and they'll provide a one-time refill. In some cases, I know CVS definitely does that, but I'm sure other pharmacies do as well. But when it comes to the mental health of the holidays, again, we talked about stress levels are really high from traveling. You face all these financial pressures of traveling and figuring out places to stay, gift giving, and in some cases, you're worried about meeting family expectations. And this can all contribute to very, very high stress levels around the holidays. And one thing to help combat this is to just go outside, take a walk, like I was saying earlier, get some sunlight, and all of these can significantly boost your mood. And staying active as a whole also supports emotional balance, especially around the holidays. And if you're someone who finds that the stress or sadness is becoming too difficult to manage, you can always reach out to a mental health counseling specialist, because the Minute Clinic at CVS also has 24/7 virtual mental health consultants to speak with or to point you in the right direction. But one thing to also keep in mind is to make sure that you are sticking to your sleep routines as accurately as possible, as much as you can. I know it can be a lot of fun partying and stuff. If you're someone who likes to stay late and drink on holidays with your family, that's totally fine. But make sure that you are getting enough sleep the night after, and to hydrate throughout the day. Last thing you want to be is hungover the day after Christmas. So be sure you're drinking plenty of water throughout the day. And remember that perfection when it comes to meeting any expectations or travel or gift giving, that is not the goal. The goal is to stay as healthy as possible and to make sure that your well-being is the top priority this year. And one way you can reduce stress And do that is from all the tips I mentioned, but reducing this stress helps create the space for more meaningful connections and making memories with your loved ones. But that's all I have today for today's edition of Wellness Wednesday. Be sure to tune in each and every day, Monday through Friday at 1 p.m. on KTAL News Now. And you can visit our website at ktalnews.com, which is where we stream every day. But that is also where you can get all of your breaking, local, and trending news stories. Again, tune in every single day on weekdays at 1 p.m. on ktalnews.com for our daily live stream. But for now, I'm Anthony Mocklin. Have a great rest of your day and a safe and happy holiday. And thank you for joining us.